Hey, um, I don't. This video, just to warn you, for a lot of people who watch me to hear stuff about Georgia wrestling and pro wrestling in particular, this might not really be that big of an appeal to you. This is about a friend of mine who died, and his name is Marcos Baca, and I'm just going to talk about him. Does it tie into pro wrestling at all? It does. Um, I don't even know how I'm going to label this or list this. I'll probably put it under every cloud has a platinum lining. Um, I just want to talk about him. Um, our mutual friends, I was looking through his Facebook page for pictures, and I was looking through conversations that we had so I could speak about him. Um, but this is one of my videos, and so what do I got playing? I got Blood In, Blood Out playing. Marcos and I would talk about Blood In, Blood Out way too much. We'd comment on Facebook. Whenever I would quote Blood In, Blood Out, he was always the first one who was going to say something. He was always going to be the first one who said something. And I was always going to be the first one who said something when he posted something, Blood In, Blood Out. We would fucking quote it all the time to each other. And it's really funny that I'm throwing a Blood In, Blood Out party at my house so people at my job can see the movie who haven't seen it because we quote it all the time at work. And how did I know him, and how does it tie into wrestling at all? When I was wrestling, uh, I still wanted to write. I still wanted to write about wrestling, and before YouTube was a thing, before podcasts were really a thing, there was the IWC, and what the international wrestling community, and there were a lot of websites that were sort of devoted to writing about wrestling, and they would do parody stuff, and they would do show reviews, and they would talk about wrestling, and then you would have forums where you would chat with people and fucking argue, and it was sort of what Facebook is like, the childish aspects, the sort of combative aspects, the like sort of binary nature of us versus them and all that stuff that existed in the IWC most definitely. And before I got into the IWC scene, I was in Colorado wrestling, and I wrestled most frequently for this group called the CWO. Oh, fuck, I love Blood In, Blood Out. I love Marcos too. I wrote for the CWO, and I wanted a name that wouldn't be attached to me. So I came up with this name of Inside Clyde. And so I would write stories about the Colorado wrestling scene and promote things based on Inside Clyde, being Inside Clyde. By the way, the guy that ran that website, who I worked with closely, his name's Ryan Katz, and he's a guy with NXT now and produces stuff, and he does great shit. Um, and he came up with his own name, which was Digging Up Dirt Bert. I don't even know if he'll fucking remember that. But anyway, I was Inside Clyde, and uh, and I just felt compelled to write about wrestling. I was doing it, and I noticed that almost all the people on the IWC scene, because I read all of it. I read SmackDown Hotel was one of the smaller sites, but then there was Lethal Wrestling, and then there was a million other fucking sites. I can't even think of them all. And you still see remnants of the IWC, like lordsofpain.net. It was sort of one of those groups as well. They were always shitty one. We always fucking made fun of them. Anyway, So I just started writing, and I got the reputation quickly as not only the guy who really was in wrestling that was writing about it. There were a couple other guys like me who were indie guys. I was the one who worked the most though, and I still found time to write. I mean, even when I was going to law school, I would fucking write. And I would write on these sites all the fucking time. That was the rep I got. It was like, how come this dickhead write for fucking 5 different sites and post almost every day? That's what I do. You probably noticed with these videos. It's like, fuck, man, you put out a lot of shit. It's like, yeah, that's how I do it. I didn't really know Marcos then. He wrote for a couple of sites that I wrote for. The ones that also were like sort of pop culture um, websites and things like that. And we didn't really interact. Um, but as we moved into the like 2000s, um, I came back to writing for Lethal, as we called it, Lethal Wrestling. But then the IWC as the WWE's fortunes sort of went down. Like 2000 was sort of the peak of the WWE, and as they sort of just started to decline slowly, the IWC started going away and giving way to things like podcasts and YouTube and the smaller sites. There just didn't seem to be a need for it anymore. The sort of bitch moan whine mentality was sort of getting consolidated, like fucking family farms in America, and that just got owned by bigger and bigger things, or people grew up or fell out of it. But I started writing for Lethal Wrestling again. I was kicked off of Lethal Wrestling by the guy who was like the sort of the tech guy, who was just this fucking cock ass motherfucker. But eventually, the Lethal Wrestling people got a, sort of found me, and they urged me to come back. And Lethal Wrestling wasn't the same as it used to be. It used to be fucking all of us, a whole group of us, and I hope a lot of them are watching this. They fucking post all the time, and you know, like Norm would post his fucking shit, and they would all post, and it was really great. But when I came back to writing for Lethal Wrestling, I felt like there was only like 3 or 4 of us that were putting out shit all the time and just trying to keep it going. Really, I always wrote a lot. So I would have this, I called it the timeless tournament, where I just picked the 128 most interesting pro wrestlers in history and just matched them up, and I was going to do this big tournament. I did like at least fucking 20 of these fucking matches. They're really interesting, really good. And another was my friend fucking Chad. Love that guy. He would do these comedy things where it was called like Ask Roddy Piper and New Jack and shit. And it would be Roddy Piper and New Jack interacting back and forth in text and these pictures that he would select. And they were really fucking great. I looked forward to reading that. But the thing that was on the site the most in my absence was Marcos and this guy Jav, who would talk about UWC or UFC. Sorry. It's like as pro wrestling's fortunes were declining, UFC was rising, and Marcos and Jav were right there. Like I think about that stuff now, and I went back and looked at it, and I was like, man, they were really on it. And Lethal Wrestling was smart to put UFC shit up, since the pro wrestling stuff was kind of few and far between. But that's when I really got to read Marcos, and I liked him, and it sort of coincided with my burgeoning interest in ultimate fighting and mixed martial arts in general and that kind of shit. Um, but something I like about me is that the older I get, the less inhibited I feel about reaching out to people that interest me. So let me put up. Uh, of course, people who die, we tend to sort of deify. But Marcos is that guy. I don't have to fucking deify. He's fucking great. He's a great fucking guy. And I'll put up 2 screenshots. This one and this one. Don't worry, you can read them. You can always pause and read them, but I'm going to read through them now. But um, so this is 2014. It's before these screenshots. I just go. I just say this right off the jump, right? By the way, this guy Marcos is just fucking great. Like he worked with like teens that needed help at one point in his life, and it has it listed here as his job, like media production coordinator at the City of Albuquerque Community Events. He works at media public relations director at YDI. Studied cinematic arts at the University of New Mexico. Lives in Albuquerque, New Mexico. Just a fucking cool ass fucking guy who's into cool dope shit. Um, and it comes across when he wrote about fucking UFC, and him and Jab would just have fun doing predictions and talking about the fucking MMA stories of the day. But out of the blue, June 13th, 2014 at 3:16 a.m. If that isn't me in a nutshell, what is? I just write him out of nowhere. You're always smart and funny. You still are smart and funny. I hope you will always remain smart and funny. And he doesn't respond. Um, but a couple months later, I go, "What up, man? Congrats on your kid's birthday soon." Because you know that he had a little one, and I knew then like what a big deal it was to have like a kid's birthday. It really is a big deal. And he goes, "Thank you." Um, and then I think he'd probably put up posts that were kind of downtrodden at a later date, like in late 2014. And I just put, "You're great." Actually, I didn't say that. I said something that if I said it out loud, people would get offended. But the point is, I just said, "You're great." And he goes, "Thanks. I'm having a hard time seeing what's so great, though. I confuse myself." Um, and then I go, "Shit, I haven't even met you, and I like you, and I hate most people." And he goes, "Thank you, man." Before we get in the deep conversation, let me explain why the IWC was so important. There was like the Wrestling Observer dirt sheets. There were sites that were dedicated more to the news of pro wrestling, like Lords of Pain. But then there's this weird subculture of what we would call smart mark fans now. But back then it was smart marky fans, yeah, but they were also creators. Like wrestling people were like, how dare I be involved in any of that shit when I got found out that Inside Clyde was me by some people. How dare you? You're in pro wrestling. Why would you go write for these fucking sites? They're horrible. You got to keep in mind, and I wrote for Lethal Wrestling, which is considered the most fucking out there and fucking crazy. Um, just did the most outrageous shit. I remember one of the guys made this fucking video game where you're supposed to be Owen Hart and you were supposed to go along the ceiling on a tethered cord, but no matter how you played the game, it always broke and he always fell and died. That's the level of fucking insanity that would go on. When the whole Chris Benoit thing happened, somebody immediately, of course, everybody was shocked. Even in the IWC jaded community, people were shocked and didn't know what to do. And Lethal was the first to put out the crazy, like, here's his fucking journal entry from zombie Chris Benoit. And just that level of fucking insanity. Um, but it served a very definitive purpose, which was fans, yes, but critics definitely. And at the heart, though, we were creators and we were a true community. Wrestling fans attempt to simulate a community. They chant together. If it's the Raw after WrestleMania, your job is to be as crazy as possible and come up with the funniest chants. But for us, it was entertaining ourselves and each other primarily. And then occasionally sort of slopping over into the world of actual pro wrestling. And I loved it. And the people that I wrote with, a lot of them I'm connected with through Facebook. And some of them I don't like so much, even to the point where a couple of them I've just flat out blocked. Because some of them are sort of insufferable, incelly, kind of losery fucking people. I've even met a couple in person that didn't necessarily make the best impression on me. But Marcos is fucking great. So looking at those like two screenshots, they're about at the 10-minute mark if you really wanted to read. But I'm going to read through. So I go, I haven't even met you and I like you and I hate most people. Some things haven't changed with me. And he goes, thank you, man. This is when he was publicly sort of going through this thing of like, I want to be a Buddhist. I think I'm a Buddhist. And people would give him different levels of shit about it. By the way, I found out much farther after the fact. He's the one who sent me this shirt. It's not like a pop culture mix-up shirt or anything. It was just a cool samurai shirt he saw, and he fucking sent it to me. And he didn't put in a note in initially. He told me later. He's just that kind of guy. He's just very supportive. And I suspect he sent this to me because this was early on, that he didn't want me to be disappointed that I wasn't getting something. I think that's a lot of the reason he sent it. He's just a very kind guy. I certainly don't have that problem now. I mean, I posted about this. So I go to my fucking P.O. box for the first time in a couple of days, and I got 4 fucking things, including this little thing, which is clearly not a shirt, and 3 things which I suspect are. Before I go into the sort of deep conversation part that I have with him, I'm going to open one of these fucking things. What do you think? I just want something that I can associate with him besides this shirt that he gave me. I mean, it makes sense, but I want to open something and I want to think of him whenever I have contact with it. I know that sounds really weird to you. Maybe it is weird. I don't give a fuck. Which one should I do? This one's fucking speaking to me. It's sort of bright and pretty. Hopefully it's something that I could actually attach to Marcos, but fuck it. I'm just going to open it. Because this shirt, frankly, wearing it and looking at it, it's making me a little sad. Um, God, he was a nice fucking guy. Uh, the fuck? $10 store credit at the Sunfrog thing. But this thing, $100 wine voucher. Holy shit. I don't drink wine. Fuck. Whoever sent this, thank you. It's the Sunfrog one. Oh, fuck, dude. All right. There's 2 movies that I quoted with fucking Marcos all the time. One of them's Blood In, Blood Out. I'm definitely going to think about him when I'm watching that at my party, but the other is motherfucking Scarface, so somebody sent me a motherfucking Sosa shirt. You don't even know how fucking perfect. I'm going to put this shit on. God damn, that's cool as shit. I tell you this, Tony. Don't you fuck me. Don't you ever fuck me. You little monkey! I told you! Marco gave me this one too. He was becoming a Buddhist, and people weren't being necessarily supportive or didn't know how to be. So I just offered to him because he is a big family man, which is another connection that he and I had. A lot of the people that we wrote with still to this day go on and on and on about, look at this great life I get to have because I don't have kids, which I always think is the most ignorant fucking thing that some of the people that I used to write with and run with would say. I think it's really stupid. It's like, oh, look, I got these great tickets to this fucking thing because I don't have kids. Well, assholes, I got to sit in the 7th row at WrestleMania for free with my kid. It's possible. And I get to have experiences with my kids. Um, I mean, it's probably pretty obvious how proud I am of them, and hopefully how devoted and proud they are of me. There's nothing like it. And he understood that, and he was a real family guy, a real family man, which I think I have become. I can only hope to be the kind of family guy that he was. Um, so I just put it out there. I don't have a religion. This is me. I don't have a religion, but I'm closer to being Buddhist than anything. Certainly went to enough temples in different countries and read enough. And he said, what are the temples like? Which I thought was a question that caught me off guard. And I said, the ones in Hawaii growing up, I grew up in Hawaii in case you didn't know, were huge and lush, open air with sand gardens with stones. Think next Karate Kid. In Japan, they varied from almost mega churchy ones to the ones that have had a heavy Shinto influence. Basically, temples in the sparsest sense, and felt more like open air auditoriums slash stadiums with heavy foliage. Others I have seen were more like Japanese style homes. And he goes, that sounds beautiful. And then I say, the sensibility is so different. It really is what Western religions are supposedly about in the modern era, but are not, which is taking a personal account of things. Ooh. And he said, I'm absolutely sold on it and can't wait to continue my journey in it. It has saved my ass from crippling depression and anxiety. And that's something that he and I would talk about for years after this. But for now, my response was, if you hadn't, read Lone Wolf and Cub from beginning to end. If you don't have them, I can send you all 28 volumes as long as I get them back someday. I have the whole series in omnibus form as well, which is the truth. Um, and I go, it really is the best, most palpable, and fantastic teaching of Buddhism. Parentheses. One form at least, but learning one facet really does allow you to see the whole diamond, as it were. He says, awesome. I've heard good things. I've started picking them up soon and reading with my son. His mom is Christian and takes him to church, but I think it'll be advantageous for him to learn Buddhism too. He already knows the metta prayer and some mantras. And I said, yes. My wife is a deacon at her Christian church. The kids go with her. They study the Bible, but the kids also learn stuff from me. It's all about scaffolding to me. This is what I'm saying. Giving them a good moral base and foundation and avenues to expand their thinking and ability to see themselves in a greater context. Then, when they get to be adults, they can decide, parentheses, and make informed decisions, close parentheses, for themselves. He says, exactly. Thank you. And I say, the white path between the two rivers, it is truly a thing. And he says, thank you for sharing all this with me. I'm glad he and I had that conversation. I'm glad we had many other conversations which I don't feel comfortable sharing. I don't know if he would be either. He's a great fucking guy. He loved MMA. He wrote about pro wrestling. He constantly challenged himself. And he was a guy who was a servant who helped others. He was a great husband, great father. I'm fortunate I got to know him, and I got to know him through the IWC, through the International Wrestling Community, or the Internet Wrestling Community. What the fuck ever, who cares? And he was among the best of us. He really was. And he was very young. And I went to his Facebook, and a number of mutual friends of ours had written something, and I was going to write something, but then I realized like the most appropriate thing would be to write something for like Lethal Wrestling, but that's gone. Like nobody in the IWC would. And then I realized like the IWC doesn't really exist anymore, but this does. This is like a continuation of what I've been doing since fucking mid 90s. And so what better place to pay tribute to him? Where our friends can see it, where people who didn't even know him can learn about him. And I guess ultimately that's why I'm doing this. Because I would want it on a selfish level, because I would want it done for me. I said it as sort of a flippant comment about on that P list, um, that there's a saying that somebody isn't really gone until they aren't really dead until they're forgotten. And if it's true that everything on the internet lives forever, then maybe this is just a small way of just keeping his memory alive. In the same way that all those people writing on Facebook are doing that as well. And his name is Marcos Baca, Baca. And I would encourage you to go there and read what people are writing about him, because you really get a sense of who he was, how important he was. He's kind, he was sweet, and he was smart, and he was fucking funny. And he loved fucking blood in, blood out, and he had a great sense of humor, and he was proud to be who he was. And I'm honoring him because he was my friend. And I would do this for any of my friends. And I hope that they do it for me. It's all a part, pro wrestling, the IWC, it's all based on this very simple premise of wanting to be part of something that is bigger than ourselves, that we feel a connection to, and that we both get something from while contributing to. That's interaction. It's beautiful. It's beautiful. He was a beautiful person. And I'm going to miss him. And I'm going to miss our infrequent but very heartfelt and deep conversations. Like reading that conversation about Buddhism blows me away. There are friends that I'm probably much closer to that I didn't have that level of discussion with before. It gives me pause. I hope you, if you knew him along with me, um, I hope this made you smile or let you see a side of him that maybe you never got to see before. And if you didn't know him, now you got to know him a little bit. And that makes me feel good. It's what we would want for ourselves. And that alone is reason to do it. And if you're a young person looking at this shit and you've gotten this far and you're like, what the fuck? The IWC sounds ridiculous and insane. It was ridiculous and insane. It was fucking wonderful. And it was as big a part of my life as being a pro wrestler who did it for a living was, if you can believe it. Thanks to all the guys and the gals from Lethal Wrestling in particular. You guys are wonderful. I hope someday to meet you all in some way, shape, or form, except for the fucking assholes that I can't stand. Uh, and thanks to Michael Roper, who's known as Barbed Wire Mike, who kind of was the head guy in charge. I'll just leave it there. For sort of providing this medium and this playground for all of us to meet each other and interact with each other. It's pretty fucking great stuff. Anyway, this has been Every Cloud Has a Platinum Lining. Rest in peace, Marcos.